June 17th, 1944, near St. Lo, Normandy. Dawn crawls over the hedgerows like pale smoke, lifting the mist from fields still torn open by days of shellfire. The air smells of churned earth, burned diesel, and something metallic that no one wants to identify. German Gefreiter Erich Voss, 19 years old, lies belly down in the damp grass, his helmet pressed against his ears as American artillery thunders again from somewhere beyond the tree line. He can feel the ground tremble, not just from the shells, but from trucks, from movement, from life. "Sie kommen wieder," a corporal mutters beside him. They're coming again. The Americans never seem to stop coming. Just 10 days earlier, on the morning of the Allied landings, German soldiers along this sector had expected a small, unconcentrated attack, a desperate thrust to open a narrow corridor. Many believed that if they held the beaches long enough, Germany's reserves would arrive to crush the assault at the water's edge. Instead, something else happened. The Allies kept arriving. Troop ships lined the channel like a floating city. Tanks rolled ashore in numbers that made the horizon look armored. Crates, barrels, fuel cans, food containers, all unloaded in a steady stream, day and night. The beaches became ports. Ports became highways. The highways became an unstoppable river of men and machines pushing inland. Erich had never seen anything like it. He had fought on the Eastern Front the year before, in Ukraine, and conditions there were brutal. Long marches, shortages of food, threadbare uniforms in winter, ammunition rationed until firefights became short bursts instead of sustained battles. Soldiers were told to make do, to hold with what you have, to be resilient. But here, in France, the Americans fought with a terrifying abundance. Their rifles were new. Their boots were clean. Their rations, heavy tins of meat, bright packets of coffee, even chocolate bars, arrived every morning without fail. German soldiers joked bitterly that the Americans were fighting a grocery war. Yet, there was nothing humorous about the grinding realization spreading through the German ranks. The Americans could afford to take losses. Germany could not. Erich lifts his head, just enough to peer over the ditch. Through the hedgerow, movement flickers. Shadows of helmets. A glint of sunlight on a truck's windshield. Voices speaking English, calm and confident, as if they were unloading supplies at a factory, not preparing for an attack within rifle range. Behind them, more trucks, and behind those, another column, and beyond those, tanks, recovery vehicles, bulldozers flattening ground for temporary depots. This is not chaos. This is organization. Oberfeldwebel Hans Löwe, a veteran of North Africa now attached to this battalion, kneels beside Erich and watches the scene with a grim, quiet understanding. "That," he says, gesturing at the endless column, "is America." Erich swallows. "What do you mean, that is America?" Löwe's voice is steady, like one repeating a lesson learned the hard way. "It is not their soldiers that win wars," he says. "It is their factories, their ships, their roads. Their hands never stop working. Even now, while they are fighting us, they are building more than we can destroy." A distant explosion rolls across the valley. American artillery adjusting ranges. Löwe doesn't flinch. "I saw it in Tunisia. We would knock out their tanks. They would simply bring more. We destroyed their fuel depot. They built another one the next day. Rommel himself called them a giant with endless pockets." Erich tries to picture America, the distant land he has only seen in propaganda posters, sprawling farms, enormous cities, highways stretching beyond the horizon. He tries to imagine what it means to fight a country that can replace every bullet it fires, every tank it loses, every meal its soldiers eat, and he suddenly feels very small. Later that day, orders arrive. Hold the hedgerow. Reinforcements are on the way. Reinforcements that, Erich knows, no longer exist in the numbers command believes. Many divisions promised to Normandy are already destroyed or trapped in Russia. The Luftwaffe overhead is a memory, American thunderbolts own the sky, even the famed Panzer divisions, once the terror of Europe, arrive battered, low on fuel, and too late. Still, the infantry digs in, because they have no choice. They wait for the American attack. It comes in waves. First, artillery, a softening barrage, then the distant rattle of machine guns, then the tanks, grinding forward through the maze of hedgerows, using bulldozer blades welded to their hulls to tear the landscape into new roads. M4 Shermans, dozens of them. German Panzer Grenadiers scramble to reposition. Someone shouts for the Panzerschreck team. Someone else runs with a message that half the battalion's ammunition has already been spent. Eric feels a hand on his shoulder. Lova again. Stay low. Fire only when you see their faces. We conserve what we have. The American infantry advances, slow but relentless, their rifles and bars laying down sheets of fire. Behind them, trucks continue to unload ammunition and fuel as if the battlefield is just another stop on the route. Eric loads his Kar 98K and waits. The moment stretches. He wonders, not for the first time, whether bravery means fighting when you believe you can win, or when you know you cannot. They hold the line for 9 hours. The hedgerow is splintered. The earth churned. The bodies of both sides lie collapsed in the summer grass. Eric's rifle barrel burns his hand. His uniform is soaked through with sweat and smoke. His hearing rings from the constant thunder of guns. Just before dusk, the order comes. Retreat. Not because the Americans broke their morale, but because another fresh U.S. battalion has arrived. Another, not one that was held in reserve, not one that was expected, just one of dozens more waiting on the beaches. Eric stares across the valley as night falls. American headlights glow like a trail of stars. Their supply trucks are still arriving long after the gunfire fades. He realizes, with a coldness deeper than fear, that the battle was never just soldiers against soldiers. It is one machine of war against another, and the American machine is bigger than anything Europe has ever seen. June 19th, 1944, a temporary field hospital near Carentan. Rain begins to fall in slow, heavy drops, darkening the canvas tents and turning the dirt pathways between them into slick brown slurry. German prisoners sit in small clusters, under guard, bandaged arms, mud-streaked faces, boots caked in blood and soil. The smell of disinfectant battles with the stench of sweat and iron. Gefreiter Erich Voss rests against a torn sandbag, his uniform ripped at the sleeve and his leg wrapped where shrapnel grazed him. He is exhausted, too tired even to feel hunger. Across from him, Oberfeldwebel Hans Lohe sits upright despite his own injuries, as if discipline alone holds him together. The distant rumble of engines grows again, steady, like a heartbeat. American trucks, dozens of them. They move with the regularity of a conveyor belt, unloading barrels of fuel, crates marked with stenciled numbers, radio spools, blankets, medical kits, ammunition labeled Cal 30, Cal 50, high explosive. Even as the wounded groan and surgeons work by lantern light, the convoys continue. Eric watches a group of American quartermasters, sleeves rolled up, laughing softly as they unload their cargo under watchful sergeants. There is no fear in them, no urgency, just routine, as if this endless supply is normal. The day before the invasion, German Army Group B commanders had looked at their estimates. 7 divisions on the Atlantic Wall, 3 armored divisions within reach. Possibility of reinforcement from the interior. On paper, it was enough to repel any landing, but the numbers lied, because the situation on the beaches was only half of the equation. The other half was in the Atlantic Ocean. While German U-boats still prowled the seas, the tide had changed. Convoys from North America now crossed in massive escorted formations. Liberty ships, victory ships, fuel tankers, troop transports, guarded by destroyers and long-range patrol aircraft, radar, sonar, escort carriers. New tactics had strangled the wolf packs, and America had industrial might to replace any ship that was lost. On average, the United States completed one Liberty ship every 334 days. Shipyards ran day and night. Welders, riveters, crane operators, engineers, all working in an industrial rhythm so vast that not even the war front could see the end of it. If a ship sank, another would be sent. If a tank burned, another would be shipped. If 1,000 rifles were dropped in the surf, 10,000 more were already crated. Germany had machinery. America had mass production. Not precision for its own sake, but quantity with purpose. Inside the hospital tent, an American medical officer kneels beside a wounded German. He speaks slowly, clearly. "You're safe here. No one's going to hurt you." The German, barely 18, stares at him in confusion. Not because of the promise, but because the doctor speaks German. Fluent German. The Allies had prepared for everything, including the language of their enemy. Eric glances toward the supply trucks again. "Where does it all come from?" he finally asks aloud. Lowe turns his head slightly. "The Americans," he says, "from everywhere." He gestures vaguely, not dramatically, but truthfully, because he has seen pieces of it himself. Their wheat comes from Kansas, their steel from Pittsburgh, their fuel from Texas, their trucks from Detroit, their landing craft from New Orleans, their boots from factories in Boston and Chicago. He pauses. And their soldiers, from every city and every town, men who worked in those factories long before they wore uniforms. Eric tries to imagine something so large. He cannot. Later that night, an American sergeant passes by the captured Germans to inspect the perimeter. The man carries a clipboard and a sidearm, but no rifle. He doesn't need one. There are sentries all around, and the camp is not temporary chaos. It is a functioning system. He stops near Lowe and Eric. "You boys held out longer than most," the sergeant says, not unkindly. His accent is from somewhere inland, Missouri, perhaps, plain, calm. Lowe looks up at him, tired but composed. "You have so much," he says quietly in English. The sergeant nods, takes a slow breath, and rests the clipboard against his leg. "My brother works at a plant back home," he says. "Building engines, every day, 12 hours. He knows I'm out here, so he works faster." He taps the clipboard lightly. "We don't stop, not while our boys are fighting." There's no arrogance in his tone, no triumph, just certainty. Eric realizes then that behind every soldier on this field, behind every crate and rifle and truck, are millions of unseen hands moving in rhythm, not out of fear or coercion, but because they believed in the necessity of what they were doing. This is not just an army. It is a nation at war. Across the lines, German high command still insists that units hold positions, that counterattacks are possible, that armored divisions can be regrouped, that the Atlantic Wall can be reformed inland. But the officers in the field know the truth. Every engagement drains German fuel. Every movement costs ammunition they cannot replenish. Every hour of resistance burns through manpower that cannot be replaced. Meanwhile, American divisions rotate. Fresh troops relieve exhausted ones. Damaged vehicles are repaired or swapped. Food arrives hot. Uniforms dry. Medical supplies are plentiful. Morale remains steady because conditions are survivable. Eric remembers the Eastern Front. Frostbite. Hunger. Ammunition counted by the bullet. Here, the Americans measure ammunition by the ton. The scale is incomprehensible. A logistics officer in the U.S. First Army will later record that by late June, they were unloading 20,000 tons of material per day in Normandy. More than entire German armies received in a month. 20,000 tons every single day. Night deepens. The trucks continue to move. Eric watches them until his eyes grow heavy. The engines fade into a dull, steady hum in his skull, like the breathing of something enormous, tireless, and alive. The realization settles inside him like cold water. This war will not be won by courage alone, not by discipline, not by determination. Germany is fighting with what remains. America is fighting with everything it can produce. And production, he understands now, is the real battlefield. June 25th, 1944. The outskirts of St. Lo, Normandy. The sky is bruised purple, heavy with the threat of rain. The once quiet farming village is now a shattered crossroads of rubble, splintered beams, and cratered roads. Dust hangs in the air, mixing with the smell of cordite and the faint, sour odor of decay. The hedgerow country, that maze of earthen walls and thick roots, has become the defining battlefield of Normandy. And somewhere within those tangled lanes, the American supply route stretches on. To the Germans, it appears endless. Gefreiter Erich Voss, recently reassigned to a reforming Kampfgruppe, walks with a column of infantry along a narrow farm path. His leg aches beneath its bandage, but there is no option of rest. German doctrine leaves no room for downtime, only repositioning, rearming what little can be scavenged, and returning to the line. He hears them before he sees them. Engines, tires, metal clattering on wooden crates. The low, steady drone of organized movement. He ducks down behind a hedgerow as his commander signals halt. Across the field, in perfect formation, drives an American convoy, GMC WW2 on 2-ton trucks, the vehicle U-Uraz. Troops call the deuce and a half. 20 of them, then 30, then more, all moving in a single file, followed by fuel carriers, ordnance trucks, mobile repair units, and even field kitchens. Dust billows behind the convoys like rolling fog. Oberfeldwebel Hans Löwe watches the procession with narrowed eyes. There, he murmurs, that is the real front line, not the tanks, not the infantry. The road. For every tank at the front, there are 7 mechanics, 4 supply trucks, 12 factory workers back home, and a rail line feeding all of them. Germany once understood this principle too. Once, before the fuel shortages, before the Allied bombing raids shattered rail yards from Hamburg to Munich, before the war spread wider than industry could reach. Erich remembers leaflets dropped by Allied planes, propaganda, they were called, diagrams of American factories producing more in a month than Germany could in 3. He had laughed at them then. He does not laugh now. The American trucks rumble past a destroyed farmhouse whose stone walls still smolder. In the distance, the sound of tank tracks shakes the ground. Shermans, fresh replacements rolling toward the fighting near Coutances. A German machine gunner beside Erich mutters, "Why do they never run out?" Loa answers, not to mock, but because someone must say it aloud, because their front line is not here. Their front line is the Atlantic Ocean. Their factories, their farms, their railways. He points at the convoy. Those are not just supplies, that is willpower. Down the road, American engineers are already laying new gravel, widening turns, clearing debris, transforming goat trails into service roads within hours. Bulldozers shove hedgerows aside, as if the ancient earthen walls were merely garden bushes. Each improvement shortens the distance supplies must travel. Each improvement speeds the next. It is momentum, the kind wars are truly won with. German commanders attempt countermeasures, snipers, ambushes, night raids on depots, mines under the roads, anything to break the logistical artery feeding the Allied advance. But each time something is disrupted, the Americans repair it. Quickly, efficiently, predictably. Where German troops rely on horse carts for much of their supply movement now, the Americans rely on engines. Where German front-line units must ration every bullet, the Americans fire until targets disappear. Where German forces retreat because fuel is gone, the Americans advance because fuel is endless. This difference is not merely tactical, it is existential. The Kampfgruppe receives orders to intercept a convoy near Hill 192. A strategic rise that commands the approach to St. Lo. The plan is small-scale, a handful of Panzerfausts and a captured American bazooka hidden in hedgerow cover. The objective is not to win the battle, but to delay. Delay has become Germany's strategy now. Not victory, just slowing the inevitable. Eric settles into position beneath a thick hedge, leaves brushing his helmet. The summer air is humid, and flies buzz around him. He can hear his heartbeat in his ears. Minutes pass. Then headlights. The convoy approaches, another line of GMC trucks, each hauling crates of ammunition marked AP and HE for Sherman cannons. A single tank follows at the end. A Sherman M4A1 with improvised track guards welded over the hull. The German squad waits until the lead truck is only 20 meters away. Jetzt, Löwe whispers. 2 Panzerfausts streak from the hedgerow. The first misses. The second slams into the third truck, blowing it sideways in a fireball. The convoy screeches to a halt. U.S. Infantry leaps from running boards, taking positions behind wheels and engines as cover. Gunfire erupts. Eric fires twice, ducks, and moves along the hedge to avoid return fire. The Americans move quickly, coordinating under-shouted commands, sending one squad to flank. Their radio chatter is fast, precise, organized. Within 4 minutes, the Germans are forced to withdraw. 4 minutes. 1 destroyed truck. 1 dead Sherman track guard disabled, but repairable. 3 American casualties. And by nightfall, the road is operational again. Another convoy passes before midnight. Eric feels the weight of this more heavily than the gunfire. How many times can they do this? How many trucks do they have? How many tanks? How many men? Lowe answers the unspoken question. As many as they need, he says. No bitterness, no defeatism, just truth. That night, the German squad shelters inside a ruined chapel. Rain patters through the holes in the roof. Eric lies awake on the cold stone floor, staring up at the faded fresco of St. Michael driving demons into the fire. He wonders if the artist knew that battles are not won by angels or courage or destiny. They are won by who can continue the longest, by who can feed an army, fuel it, clothe it, replace it. He whispers into the darkness. How do you fight a nation that never stops moving? No one answers. Outside, on the distant road, the sound of American engines rolls on, unsteady, unstoppable, like the turning of the world. June 29th, 1944. Hill, 92, northeast of St. Lo. Morning fog clings to the fields like ghost breath, dense enough that shapes appear only at arm's length. The hedgerows rise on either side of the narrow lane, walls of tangled roots and thorn that have stood since before Charlemagne, now transformed into fortress ramparts. Rainwater drips from leaves in slow, patient ticks, the only sound before the war resumes. Gefreiter Erich Voss crouches beneath an overgrown bank, mud filling the grooves of his boots. His rifle rests across his knee. His breath fogs faintly in the cool morning air. Around him, the remains of their Kampfgruppe awaits. 27 men where there had once been 60. Some stare blankly. Some sharpen bayonets they will likely never use. Some whisper prayers, quiet and private. Above them, the sky begins to rumble. At first, it sounds like distant thunder. Then it grows, rolling, rising, multiplying, until the horizon itself seems to vibrate. Lowe does not look upward. He knows the sound. Flugzeuge, he says. Aircraft. The fog thins. The sky opens, and the Allies arrive. Dozens of P-47 Thunderbolts slice through the clouds in formation, each engine deep and gruff, like iron beasts growling across the sky. The aircraft gleam silver gray in the growing light, their wings lined with rockets and heavy .50 caliber machine guns. They fly low, confident, unchallenged. The Luftwaffe is absent, not delayed, not regrouping. Gone. Fuel shortages, destroyed airfields, an overwhelming Allied fighter presence have left German skies undefended. Where once the Luftwaffe strafed columns and dueled for air supremacy, now the P-47s roam free, hunting targets across Normandy at will. Eric watches the American aircraft with quiet dread. They do not search. They know They have reconnaissance. They have aerial maps. They have radios. And they have fuel enough to circle and circle and circle. One thunderbolt dips a wing and peels away. Diving low. The roar is deafening. Rockets streak outward, bright smoke trails cutting through mist. And a hedgerow explodes in a shower of mud and branches. German soldiers scatter. Deckung, cover. Another flight arrives, half a second behind, strafing with 50 caliber fire that tears through brush, bark, and bone alike. The rounds punch holes through thick tree trunks. There's nowhere to hide. Germany once fought in the open. Now it fights under a sky it no longer controls. The attack lasts only minutes, not long enough to wipe them out, just long enough to soften them. It is deliberate. It is systematic. It is the new reality. When the aircraft vanish over the western horizon, the silence that follows is almost unbearable. Eric's ears ring. The taste of dirt and cordite coats his tongue. Beside him, Loa rises slowly, brushing damp soil from his sleeve. There is no anger in his eyes, only comprehension. "Do you understand now?" he asks quietly. Eric nods, because this is not just air superiority. This is air dominance, a monopoly on the sky. The Americans don't attack when opportunity arises. They attack when it is convenient. Germany once dictated tempo. Now America chooses the hour, the minute, the second. Word spreads through the ranks by mid-morning. The Americans are preparing to take Hill 192, not with one attack, but with overwhelming force. Eric overhears officers speaking in tense whispers. The U.S. 29th Infantry Division is massing troops near the river. Engineers are cutting corridors through the hedgerows. Sherman tanks have been reinforced with welded prongs, rhinoceros devices, to break through root walls. Artillery observers are already ranging targets. The Americans do not simply assemble forces. They gather solutions. Every obstacle the Germans create becomes a problem the Americans fix. With tools, machines, and planning rooms that stretch thousands of kilometers away. War, Eric realizes, is not improvisation anymore. War is engineering. At noon, the bombardment begins. Not sporadic, not probing. Coordinated. American artillery saturates the ridge. 100 mm howitzers. 100 mm long-range guns. Naval guns firing from beyond the coastline. The earth shakes in rhythmic waves. Leaves fall like dying birds. The ground turns to blackened slurry. Somewhere in the chaos, a young German private, no older than 17, clamps his hands over his ears and screams until his voice breaks. No one hears him. The world is thunder. When the barrage ends, the absence of sound is somehow worse. Then the whistles blow. The Americans advance. They come not as a reckless charge, but as a moving line of coordination. Infantry crawling low through hedgerow openings. Tanks advancing slowly, hull down, gun turrets scanning, radio operators calling adjustments, engineers marking lanes, medics already moving with the assault wave. Every part of the advance is connected. Every part supports the others. It is not genius. It is not heroic. It is interlocking design. The Germans fire. The Americans return fire with tenfold weight. The Germans fall back. The Americans continue forward, steady and unbroken. There is no hesitation. There is no fatigue. There is momentum. Eric reloads again and again. His shoulder aches from recoil. Sweat stings his eyes. Mud slicks his arms. Every breath burns like cold smoke. But the Americans keep coming. And for each one who falls, another takes his place. Not because they are reckless, because the machine behind them never stops feeding them forward. Loa shouts orders, rallying the line. His voice is hoarse but unbroken. Hold the flanks, aim for the officers, conserve ammunition. They hold for 1 hour, then 2, then 3. The ridge becomes a graveyard of broken hedgerows and burnt-out tanks. But by late afternoon, the German line is a shadow. Fragments of squads, scattered across smoking fields. Ammunition is nearly gone. The machine gun barrels glow a dull, exhausted red, and still the American columns move. Not faster, not with frenzy, just forward, like a tide that does not care whether it is resisted. As the sun dips low, the German withdrawal sounds almost gentle. Boots in mud, low voices, one last look over shoulders. Hill 192 is lost. St. Lo will follow, and the road behind the Americans, the one that has never stopped moving, continues to carry supplies, fuel, replacements, engineers, radio operators, mechanics, stretcher teams, chaplains, cooks, and quartermasters. An army sustained by a nation. Eric and Lova retreat into the twilight. They do not speak. There are no words left, only the distant hum of engines, and the quiet understanding that tomorrow the machine will move again. July 9th, 1944. The ruins of St. Lo. Smoke hangs over the shattered city like a shroud. Walls stand without roofs, chimneys without houses, doors without rooms. Trees are splintered into jagged spears, and the streets are cratered into uneven graves of stone and mud. Locals who have survived move like ghosts, silent, hunched, eyes hollow. St. Lo was once called the City of Roses. Now soldiers call it the capital of rubble. Gefreiter Erich Voss steps carefully over the collapsed remains of a bakery. The smell of burned flour still lingers. His uniform is stiff with dried mud, his helmet dented, his canteen nearly empty. His battalion is gone, absorbed, broken apart, reassigned, thinned by constant retreat and casualties. He no longer moves in disciplined lines with hundreds of comrades. Now he is one among dozens. Germany once fielded armies. Now it fields survivors. Oberfeldwebel Hans Loa stands near what was once the church square, looking toward the western road. Trucks, tanks, and equipment move along it in a steady procession, but not German ones, American ones. Again, still, always. Convoy after convoy rolls through the ruins of St. Lo like a river flowing through a dried-out gully. The vehicles are loud, smelling of gasoline and machine oil. Their engines do not stall. Their wheels do not slip. Their headlights shine like unblinking eyes. It is not just force. It is confidence. Loa speaks without turning. This is no longer a battle for ground, he says. This is a battle for supply, and we are losing it. Eric knows this. He has known for days, but hearing it aloud makes the truth sharp. Weeks earlier, German High Command had promised a counteroffensive. They told the troops that Panzer Lehr and the 2nd SS Panzer Division would arrive fully fueled and ready to strike, that the Allies could be thrown back into the sea if the German lines simply held long enough. But the counterattack never came. Fuel trains were bombed before reaching Normandy. Panzer replacement parts were stuck in depots that no longer had functioning rail connections. Airfields were shattered before aircraft could lift. Radio lines crackled with silence where orders used to be issued. German soldiers had fought with belief. Now they fight with habit. The Americans, meanwhile, construct a supply base at Omaha Beach that defies imagination. Eric hears the news secondhand from a captured British sapper in a makeshift field prison outside the city. Artificial harbors, called mulberries, assembled from sunken ships and concrete caissons. Floating piers stretching into the sea, letting trucks drive directly from ship decks onto land. Fuel pumped under the English Channel through flexible pipelines, like veins feeding an army. Fuel, ammunition, vehicles, replacement parts, an entire economy ferried across an ocean. Not once, not briefly, continuously, Germany had believed the ocean to be a barrier. America made it a bridge. By afternoon, American infantry begins clearing houses near what used to be the marketplace. These soldiers move differently than when they first landed. They are not unsure. They are not adjusting. They are experienced now. Their pockets are full of rations. Their helmets are free of dents. Their rifles are well oiled. They look fed. They look rested. They look alive. German soldiers, by contrast, eat once a day If that, wear boots with seams splitting, carry rifles with mismatched serial numbers, look like men who have not slept in weeks. The contrast is not just physical, it is psychological. The Americans do not show fatigue because their army absorbs fatigue. If a man is tired, he rests. If his uniform tears, he gets a new one. If he is wounded, he is evacuated quickly. The machine supports the soldier. German soldiers support the machine, and the machine is failing. In a bombed-out wine cellar, Eric and Loa share their last tin of preserved meat. The room is dim, lit only by the flicker of a half-candle stuck into a rusted bottle top. Rain hammers the broken roof above. Eric breaks the silence. What happens now? Loa takes a long moment before answering. We fall back to the next line, and the next, and the next. He stares at the candle flame. And we hope the war ends before the world does. There's no sarcasm, no bitterness, just exhaustion. Outside, thunder rolls across the horizon. Not weather, artillery. The Americans are preparing their next advance. Every German soldier hears it and recognizes the rhythm. First bombardment, then tanks, then infantry, then engineers, then the convoys that feed them all. It is a loop that repeats, a wheel that turns, and every rotation grinds the German army down thinner. Eric feels the ground shake. He feels his stomach tighten. He feels the world narrowing around him. He thinks of home, his father's workshop with its wood shavings, his mother humming in the kitchen, his little brother playing with carved horses. He has not heard from them in months. He does not know if they are alive. War grows larger than men, and men become smaller than war. A distant shout breaks the reverie. Amerikanische Panzer, vorwärts. American tanks crest the ridge near the cathedral, the same ridge that German defenders had sworn they would never surrender. Shermans, half-tracks, Jeep Scouts directing movement by radio. The American advance is measured, coordinated, predictable like clockwork. Because it is not improvisation, it is system. Loa grips his rifle. Once more, he says, it is not a rallying cry, it is acknowledgement. They will fight because they are here. They will fight because soldiers fight. But deep inside, Eric understands something final. This is not collapse because of defeat. This is collapse because the other side will not run out. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not before Germany does. He shoulders his rifle. The sky opens again with fire, and the machine moves forward. July 14th, 1944. The fields east of St. Lo shimmer with summer heat. The air thick with smoke and dust that never settles, as if the war itself refuses to let the landscape breathe. Eric Voss and what remains of his unit move along a narrow farm track littered with broken helmets, abandoned crates, and tire ruts deep enough to drown a boot. No commands barked, no songs sung, only the steady hollow rhythm of boots on dirt. Above them, the sky is alive again with the rumble of aircraft, distant at first, then close enough to feel in the chest. Every German soldier now flinches at the sound, not out of cowardice, but recognition. The Americans are advancing again, and there is no time to dig new trenches or rebuild defensive lines. The war moves too fast now. The retreat is not a march, not organized, not strategic. It is simply necessary. The American supply machine pushes forward behind its infantry like a tide pushing against a drowning shoreline. Shermans roll past wrecked farm carts. Bulldozers push aside stone walls that once stood for centuries. Field depots spring up in fields where wheat should be growing. The front is no longer a line. It is a widening field of pressure. Erich can feel the difference in the air. German soldiers walk with heads lowered, steps unsteady, rifles slung loosely from numb hands that have fired too many shots, carried too little food, slept too little sleep. The officers no longer speak of victory, only distance. We fall back to the Veer River, Loa says, though his tone carries no conviction that the river means safety. Every German soldier knows now that the Americans do not pause. When they stop advancing, it is only to reorganize, refuel, resupply, and then start again with the same strength as before. Eric remembers when German troops once moved with that kind of momentum, back in 1940, across France, when the Wehrmacht was the hammer that broke armies. But now Germany is stretched thin across continents. Its supply routes shattered, its factories bombed, its fuel dwindling to vapor, while America grows stronger with every passing month. This realization settles into Eric's bones. The Americans do not simply have more, they replace faster than the war can consume. He sees it in every captured ration tin, every fresh bandage on an American prisoner, every new truck rolling untouched down a road that German artillery cannot interrupt long enough to matter. Even the way American soldiers walk is different, alert, confident, healthy. They are sustained, supported, connected to something bigger than themselves. The German army feels like a man drowning in slow water, thrashing to stay above the surface, while the American army moves like a ship carried by deep, endless currents. By dusk, Eric and Lova reach a grove of willow trees near the riverbank. The air here is cooler, quieter, as if the landscape itself has not yet learned the language of war. Eric kneels to fill his canteen, watching ripples spread across the stream. For a moment, just one moment, the world feels human again. Then artillery echoes, closer than before. Loa rests a hand on Eric's shoulder, not to comfort, but to steady him. "We are not beaten yet," he says, not as a declaration, but as a thread of hope stretched thin and fraying. Eric nods, though in his chest he feels the truth tightening. They may not be beaten, but they are being worn away, grain by grain, like stone under the constant pull of the tide. The roar of engines rises again on the wind. The Americans are coming, and the war moves forward. August 6th, 1944, near Mortagne, in the rolling hills of Normandy. The heat hangs heavy, and the grass stands dry and brittle as straw. Eric Voss moves with the remnants of his company across a ridge pitted with shell holes and scorched hedgerows, their uniforms bleached by sun, sweat, and exhaustion. Word travels quickly but without structure now. Panzer units have been ordered to counterattack, to strike back at the Americans, to cut through their supply lines and push them back toward the sea. The order sounds bold, decisive, like the echo of a Germany that once existed. But every soldier on the ground knows the truth before the first engine even turns. They are attacking not because victory is within reach, but because there is nowhere left to retreat. The assault begins before dawn, tanks rolling in low gear, infantry moving in silence, officers whispering passwords under their breath, but the silence does not last. American spotter planes are already overhead before the 1st Panzer clears the tree line, their engines humming like mechanical insects, circling, waiting. And then the sky opens. P-47. Thunderbolts dive like hawks, rockets streaking down in white trails of smoke, explosions tearing through the first wave before it can even form a line. Eric covers his head as the ground shakes, splinters and dirt spraying across his face. The German tanks try to maneuver, try to hide in the hedgerows, but there is no hiding from the sky. Radio chatter breaks down into shouts, then static, then nothing. The counterattack dissolves into fire and wreckage. The dream of reversing the tide dies in less than an hour. By midday, the American infantry advances again, calm, coordinated, unhurried. Shermans roll past the burning hulks of German panzers, their engines steady, their crews focused. The road behind them remains full. Trucks, fuel tankers, ambulances, bulldozers, radio jeeps, supply carriers, the machine intact, unbroken, unstoppable. Eric runs with what remains of the line, lungs burning, legs trembling, rifle slamming against his shoulder with each step. He does not think of orders or strategy anymore. He thinks of survival. The retreat turns into flight, the flight into scattering. Soldiers breaking into small groups across the countryside, each moving by instinct rather than command. Loa stays with him, always just a step behind, steady even now, though his breath comes short and harsh. They reach a barn at the edge of a valley, collapsing behind its stone wall just long enough to realize what the valley below holds, the American advance stretching like a river of steel to the horizon. There is no gap, no weak point, no place to strike. An army that cannot be starved, cannot be slowed, cannot be cut off. Loa exhales, a sound not of defeat, but of understanding. "This is the end of the war for us," he says, voice quiet, almost gentle. Eric does not respond. He knows it too. They could keep fighting. They could die in the next field, in the next hedgerow, under the next artillery barrage, or they could walk down the hill, into the open, toward the enemy they have spent years learning to fear. Eric stands first, not brave, not broken, simply finished. They walk with hands raised. No one jeers. No one mocks. An American soldier approaches, young, sunburned, dust on his boots, and gestures for them to sit, to drink water, to rest. The war, for them, is over. And as Eric drinks the cold water offered by the enemy, he understands the truth that thousands of German soldiers came to see in Normandy. America did not win because it had better weapons, or better soldiers, or better leadership. America won because it could keep fighting when everyone else was already finished. The machine never stopped. The road never ended. The tide never receded. The war was not decided by battles, but by endurance. And endurance belonged to those who could build, supply, transport, replace, and begin again tomorrow.